recording. Hey, hi, hello. Happy Easter to all of you. So, let's just dive right in. I'm going to go over, rather than going into one chart in depth, I'm going to kind of assume that most of you watching this have not a lot of background into human design. And so what I actually want to do is show you 3 charts of people that you all know and kind of look at the similarities and the differences in these charts, right? To kind of give you some context, right? Because the last one we did was Mac Miller. He is a pure generator, I believe. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at 2 other generators, manifesting generators, and we're also going to be looking at a different type as well. And you will, if you get lost in my language, don't worry. I will come back and if I jump too far ahead, I will backtrack and I will explain it. So don't worry if you get a little bit lost. I will be here to hold your hand through it. So let's get started with Rihanna. So this is Rihanna's chart in front of me here. And you're going to notice some text on the side behind my camera. Just ignore that. I don't want you guys to pay any attention to that at all. And I also, you can completely just ignore the columns in the red and the black too. All that I'm going to be speaking about and all that you need to pay attention to is my lovely face and also the body graph, which has the 9 centers. And I'll discuss them as I go along. So, first of all, there's 9 centers in the human design body graph, and all of them are going to be either white, which means they are undefined or open, or they're going to be colored in, which means they are defined. If they're colored in, you don't have to worry what color they are. It doesn't mean anything. It's either white or filled in. So, the first thing to notice is that 70% of the population has a defined sacral. The sacral is this red square down here. And what this is this is a motor center. So there's 4 motor centers in the body. There's the root center, the solar plexus, the ego center, and the sacral. Now, of all of the 4 motor centers, the sacral is the big battery, right? It is it's responsible for your life force energy, and it's your drive to create, right? So if someone has a defined sacral, which about 7 out of 10 of you watching this will, it means that you're designed to consistently have access to that energy. So people with defined sacrals are have been responsible for making up most of the workforce and having kids. They kind of have this built-in desire to create and be a part of the world in creating, right? They're very interested in their own passions. When people say do what you love and follow your hobbies and your passions, that's a very generator thing to say. And now the other important center, the other important center to be aware of is the throat center. So this is the brown square up here. So the difference between a generator and a manifesting generator, which is still a part of the generator family, right? They have a few differences, but they essentially are more or less the same. But the difference is that the manifesting generator, which is what Rihanna is, they have a motorized throat. So they have a defined throat all of the time, whereas a generator may or may not have a defined throat. But they always have a defined throat because it's always getting energy consistently from one of the motor centers. In Rihanna's case, it is the manifesting generator channel, the 20 to the 34, the channel of charisma, right? So essentially what this means is that she's a little bit faster. And I don't mean that in a good or a bad way, right? When you're a manifesting generator, the differences between the two kinds is kind of that a manifesting generator will be faster, they'll skip steps, they'll begin more projects. They won't necessarily complete as much as a generator, whereas the generator is more thorough, right? They tend to be more thorough in the way that they do things, whereas manifesting generators have a faster energy, but they kind of tend to be a little bit like one thumb in all of the pies kind of thing. So it's important to know that the throat center is all about self-expression and communication, not just in terms of the way that we communicate and the physical language, but literally just the way you express yourself in any way. The throat center is the center in human design, regardless of if it's defined or not, that gets things out, right? Everything is reaching towards the throat center. And so let's look at the two white centers up the top. So this is, and by the way, something that you may notice is that the centers in human design closely correlate to the chakra system. So here we have, which would be the equivalent of the third eye chakra and the crown chakra. So we have the head center, which is responsible for inspiration. And then we have the ajna center, which is like the third eye. It's responsible for all of your beliefs, your thought processes, your opinions. People with open ajnas are here to stay open-minded. They're here to sample a lot of different belief systems, but never get too wound up in their stubbornness, right? And 70% of the population has an open crown. This means that you essentially can receive inspiration from anywhere. You're open to externally receiving inspiration. Now, she also has an open root center, which is the square down the bottom. So this acts as a pressure center, like the crown. People with open or undefined crown centers tend to there's high and low expressions of each center of each gate, which is the little numbers, right? So I just want you guys to really embed into yourself that if I ever say, you know, the positive or the plus or the negative, there's positives and negatives to everything, right? There's no bad design. It's not what I'm trying to get at. Anywho, when they are open, they can act as pressure centers. The head acts as a pressure to figure things out, to get things, and the root acts as the pressure to get things done, right? The root center is responsible for our adrenals, and it also acts as the divine timing center, because the root acts in pulses, right? Pulses on and off, on and off. Now, Rihanna has an emotional solar plexus that is defined. What this means is that she is going to constantly experience an emotional wave at any given point of her life, regardless of what's going on outside of her. It doesn't matter, right? She's always going to be experiencing that. And so in human design, if you have a defined solar plexus, that is always your authority. I'm going to slow down a little bit. We have a lot to get through. So it always acts as the authority, because if you are defined there, and even if you don't know, you'll either resonate with this or not, you probably know what it's like to be really, really high and be like, hell yeah, and agree to something. And then you naturally drop into your wave and you're like, why did I say yes to that? I don't want to do that. You know, because each of us, depending on our design, we all have a location in the body that is designed to give us wisdom as to how to utilize our energy or not. So if you have a defined sacral, right, then you have a gut response, you have a gut feeling. But the thing is that the sacral is designed to work in the now, and it can only respond to things that come up, whereas people with a defined solar plexus who are always going to be in an emotional wave, they that kind of overrides it, because the sacral can say yes to something like, oh, I've got a really good gut feeling about it, but they still need to check in with their emotions, because their emotions are always going to be there, and so they do need to be aware of that. Now, you may lose me for a second, but I will be back. I'm going to jump on to Donald Trump for a moment. Trump is also a manifesting generator, right? So the way that we can tell is because he has a defined sacral. Anyone with a defined sacral is part of the generator family, always. So Trump also has an emotional solar plexus that is defined. His goes to his sacral, and it also goes to his throat. Now, something interesting about him is that we can see up here, he does have a defined ajna. So what does a defined ajna look like? It looks like someone who it's correct for them throughout their life to adopt points of view. They're going to, I guess, be more mentally stubborn, and that is correct for them. I don't know if I would say that all of the things he's stubborn about are great. However, it is correct for him to hold a really strong point of view. And something else that we're going to look at is this line here, the 45 to the 21. This is an interesting channel. This is called the money line. And so with the gates 21 and 45, the 21 is all about having an awareness of distributing resources and saving and holding things, and the throat is all about spending. Now, the ego center, which is this one here, this is your will center. This is something that most of the population does not have defined, and that means that most people do not have regular access to their internal resources, right? So it is about money, and it is about your physical resources, but it's also very much about your willpower, your promises, right? People with this small motor center defined tend to, when they're completely run out of energy, but they promise someone they'd do something, they this motor center acts as a little, like, that last little bit of push, like, oh, I said I would, so I'll do it, you know? So he has 3 of 4. He also has an undefined root center. This square here, which he has completely open, let's chat about this for a second. This is the G center. this is your identity center, right? It also harbors self-love as well. People with an open G center often aren't as sure-footed of their identity. They can kind of feel conflicted within themselves of like the who am I, what did I really come here to do? Now, the positive and the higher expression of this is that it's very easy for these people to be receptive to that of others and understand others. And when they're around the people of others, so when a center is open, undefined, then you're very receptive to the people around you, the collective consciousness, your conditioning that you got from like school and your parents and your partners. Also the celestial weather, so what the planets are doing and the placements that they go into. So essentially what this is saying is that Trump doesn't likely experience a consistent internal identity of himself, right? Rihanna does have a defined G center. In fact, she has a lot of definition in her G center because she has a lot of those gates activated, which means that she is likely very sure of herself. Doesn't necessarily mean that everyone with a defined G center is going to be super confident, right? Because we're all prone to conditioning and all kinds of things, but it's there. However you express it, it's there, right? You know who you are. Your identity doesn't change over your lifetime. It just develops. Now, something else that I do just want to talk about is the spleen, this triangle here. So the spleen is responsible for our health, our lymphatic system. It also is the center that harbors fear and intuition. So people at the lowest expression with an open spleen can have trouble letting go of things that are not healthy for them because they don't consistently have access to the kind of intuition saying like, oh, I know this isn't right for me, this is bad for me, etc. They can also be very, very, very concerned about their health. At the highest expression, people with an open spleen can be fearless because they don't have as much fear holding them back because they don't have consistent access to that energy in them either. So there's different parts for everything, right? Now let's quickly jump over to Depp. Okay, so you guys, Depp is really interesting because the first thing we notice is he does not have a defined sacral. He does not have a defined sacral, yet I can see looking at this, he has a motorized throat, which means he is a manifestor. By the way, manifestor in human design has absolutely nothing to do with like the law of attraction or manifestation or anything like that. They're completely different things. Now, this is really like the main thing I want to touch on because this is really, really big. People with defined and undefined sacrals are here for very different purposes, right? They live their lives in very different ways. So there are 3 kinds of non-sacral beings. And one is a reflector, one is a projector. Now, Depp, who is a manifestor, these are very interesting people. So let's just jump back to the generator and the manifesting generator for a second, right? Sacral energy is very... Okay, so the sacral battery, out of all of the motor centers, the sacral is the only one that is sustainable, meaning it's designed to be recharged every night while you sleep, and then you wake up and you're like, oh yeah, I'm ready to go, I want to create. Now, another way to fill this battery up, to keep it very high, is to do things that you love. Generators aren't just here to be like a slave to capitalism, right? They're not here to just like slave away doing stuff they hate. That's one way to deplete your battery very quickly, being taken advantage of in the things that you don't want to do. Now, the sacral, when a sacral is happy, when a sacral is doing what it wants to be doing, it creates this magnet, right? Like, being in the presence of a happy generator is just like the most warm feeling ever. They have warm, open, and enveloping auras, right? It's just a wonderful, wonderful feeling. They suck you into their mission, and when a sacral does something that it loves, it can continue to just go and go and go, essentially, until you really need sleep. So when people say things like, oh, follow your passions, do what you love, it's a very generator thing to say. If you, like most people, have a sacral and you've been blessed enough to do your hobbies and your passions throughout your life, then you'll know what it feels like when I say, sometimes if I want to paint, I can wake up and paint, and I'll look at the time and I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten for like 10 hours because you're just so like absorbed in what you're doing. Non-sacral people do not consistently have that, right? They do not get energy from doing the things that they love in the same way as sacral beings do. The reason for that is because they're not designed to be a part of that workforce. Now, they certainly can be, and they certainly often are. There's a lot of manifestors, at least I'm going to be honest, I'm not huge on pop culture, but to what I've seen, there's a lot of manifestors in politics, which I'll explain in a second, and there's a lot of projectors. I wouldn't say so much now that I'm aware of, but kind of in like the 80s era of music, there's a lot of projectors. But for the most part, they're generators, right? Because it takes a lot of energy. And so the reason why a lot of manifestors end up in politics is because the manifestor is designed to have a big impact. That's what they came here to do. They came here to have a really, really big impact, and they're not here to be inclusive of you. They're not here to be liked, per se. They're here to create a fuck ton of change, and often in very jarring ways. Now, this doesn't mean that manifestors aren't really nice people or anything, because I know a lot of wonderful manifestors that I love a lot, but they're not really here to work to your own mind timing. The interesting thing about a manifestor is, as a generator, when you're living in when you're living to your design, you kind of have to wait and slow down and respond to things. You have to be in time with the universe. But a manifestor is very in sync with their own timing. They don't need to wait for other people. They might find that life is easier if they inform people of what they're doing, but manifestors are very, they're here to fuck shit up, essentially. Now, our third man, Depp, third human, is also emotionally defined. Very emotionally defined, actually. He also has a completely open spleen. And he, however, has a defined root. Now, his root goes to his emotional solar plexus. So what this means is the divine timing center, the root center, right, works in pulses. How it's going to work for him is, and most of this will not be conscious either, it might be, but how it's going to work for him is he's going to, first of all, because he's a manifestor, be in his own timing and initiate whenever he wants to. But it's going to happen in accord to his emotions. Because the emotional solar plexus is that what is lighting up the root center. He also has the money line. Because his is in black, it means that it is more conscious for him, because I believe that Trump's was unconscious in his heart center, perhaps the other way around. Now, something else, now that I've shown you these three charts, something that I want to talk about that I personally think is interesting is, let's have a look. Okay, so if you can see my mouse, follow with me. Here we have the ego center. We have this black channel coming up here to this center, the throat. Then we have the center here, right? However, these two centers here that are lighting each other up have no connection to the other centers, right? So what this means is that in his heart, G, and throat, he has a channel of energy up here constantly operating. And then down here, you can't see, but in his root and in his ESP, he has another channel, but the two don't have any consistent way to create one big flow of energy. If he had this little gate here, for example, then it would. This makes him something that we call a split definition. Now, just for context, something very interesting is, let's look back at Rihanna's chart. Here, follow my mouse, we can see this energy has a consistent route to get all around, right? You can always trace a channel going between them all. This means that she is single definition. And Trump, I also believe, is single definition. Yeah, see? Here, here, here. And we can go here, up here, down there, up there. So the energy is constantly circulating around. Now, what does this mean? People who have the energy always wants to be able to take the easiest route, right? Well, if you have a small, just like say one gate that needs to be connected, then you're constantly gonna be looking unconsciously for people, animals, or plants, placements in the celestial weather. Your energy is constantly going to be desiring the energy of that one gate that is going to fill up to make your energy complete, right? So we can also do connection charts. We also, like, when we're near people and when we interact with people, if they have a gate that we're missing that allows us to have a complete single definition, then that's going to be really desirable to us. Now, people who already have a single definition, they essentially don't feel inclined to need anyone or anything to complete themselves. Of course, it's all just a big illusion, right? But illusion or not, it's biochemistry, and it is very true in the human experience. Now, I'm a small split definition, which means there's just a couple of gates that I need to have a full definition, a full channel definition. And I've looked at other people's charts a lot, and I've noticed that many of the people that I spend a lot of time with, or old partners, right, they have the gates that I have been missing. So, like, think of Rihanna for an example. That is a boss bitch woman who doesn't need anyone. She doesn't need a man, right? And having that single definition, I think, is very, very, it's a very strong presence, right? Like, you really feel it. You really feel what it is like to be in a single definition's presence. I believe Mac Miller was a split definition. Most people are splits. I think, I don't think that most people, especially not generators, are gonna be single definition. It's interesting that they are in this case, though. Now, I don't think there was anything else I wanted to say. I think that we probably covered a lot. So, if you guys have any questions, let me know. If you want to learn how to read charts in a more structured and less, actually I can't promise that way, then I am having a class beginning on the 14th of April. So I will post something in the comments about that as well. And I hope that you all have a happy Easter and that you enjoyed. Let me know which subject you thought was the most interesting. Bye!